play Misty for me?
Misty, huh?
Don't you like me?
Stop it, you dirty bastard! Oh,
You're a very nice girl.
But who needs nice girls?
yeah, get lost, assholes!
I never said anything about not coming back for seconds. Don't spoil my fun, darling. I love to give you things. I just want to say how sorry I am about everything.
The thing I hate the most in the whole world is a jealous female.
It's that other bitch, isn't it? Why didn't you take my call?
First time I thought about being a director was way after I'd become an actor. I think it was when I was doing Rawhide, and I had had some discussions with the producers at that time to direct an episode or so. That didn't pan out for one reason or another, so I did some second unit stuff and little bits and pieces here and there. I think Don Siegel was probably my biggest sponsor of the idea of directing films. I had worked with him in quite a few films, and we enjoyed the collaboration very much. And when I went to him in 1970 and told him that I had this little project that I wanted to direct, he said, "Oh, by all means." He said, "Let me support you on that, and let me sign your Directors Guild of America card," and all that sort of thing. It was a great period of my life because it started another segment, and it was a very experimental time for me. I was going off and doing Paint Your Wagon, kind of musical thing up in Oregon, and then coming back and doing Beguiled, and musical thing would have been to follow it with an adventure film, Dirty Harry or something, but that didn't work out that way. Jo Hyams was a girl that I'd known for many, many years. She was a legal secretary. She'd say, "I'm going to be a writer, screenwriter someday." I'd say, "Yeah, I'm going to be an actor, and I'm studying acting," what have you. And one day, some years later, she came up with a treatment called Play Misty for Me. I liked the Alfred Hitchcock kind of thriller aspect, but the main thing I liked about it was beyond that, the story was very real. The story was believable because these kind of commitments or misinterpreting thereof go on all the time. Jo Hyams had a female friend that was very much a stalker type, and she didn't commit homicide or anything like that, but she went around and completely harassed this person that she knew very slightly. It was a sort of a great statement on stalking. Nobody ever thought much about that in those days, 1970, and that's something I hadn't seen in the suspense films in general. So I optioned the treatment from her and told her that I wanted to get around to it someday. And then later on, I was working on a film in Europe, and Jo called me up and she said, "Clint, if you're not going to do anything with that picture, I've got an opportunity to sell it to Universal, and they're going to offer me pretty good dough, and I really need the money." So because I was occupied at the time, I said, "Well, I can't hold you back from making some good money, so you go ahead and sell it."
Clint Eastwood, hero for hire, blazes his way across a land of lust and injustice.
Later on, I had a 3-picture deal with Universal and became very tied in with them. So I went to Lou Wasserman and I said, "You've got this little project." And I said, "I want to do it and I'll be in it." And I said, "I'd also like to direct it." And Lou just looked, without missing a beat, looked across the desk and said, "That's fine. That's very good." So I said, "Boy, that was easy." So I got up to leave and I started walking down the hallway, and my agent, Lenny Hershan, was with me, and I said to Lenny, I said, "Boy, that was easy." And all of a sudden I heard this behind him, "Oh, Lenny, can we talk to you a minute?" So they called him back and they said, "Yeah, we don't mind Clint directing this film. We just don't want to pay him." We don't want to pay him what his regular 3-picture deal was. We want to pay him less. And Lenny came back later and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Fine, I'll do it for nothing." I said, they're smart not to pay me. They should make me show my stuff. Lenny said, "Well, let me go back and get just a percentage of the gross profits of the film, and we won't ask for anything." And I said, "That's fine by me." Turned out to be a good choice, but at the same time, I would have done it for nothing. I think most people who really want to do something badly will do that. So I think they were saying, you know, we'll let Eastwood go ahead and make this little film, and then he'll go back and he'll do some big adventure for us, and it doesn't matter. And I think they were sort of somewhat placating me at the time.
Well, Clint and I had known each other for many years. We had lived in the same apartment complex, and when he was first getting started, we had worked in the same lot here, this lot, Universal International it was called then. We discussed the business back and forth, and we finally used to say, well, maybe someday we can make our own movies. Well, of course, his career took off very quickly, and he approached me one day and said, why don't we get together, you come to work at El Paso. So I did, and I'd been there just a few weeks when he brought me this script. He was shooting Beguiled at the time with Don Siegel. He said, read this, see what you think about it. So I read it, loved it, identified, and he said, I'd like to do this next. And I said to him, you are thinking of directing it, aren't you? And he's kind of a little shy to say yes about it, but I said, no, you've got a handle on it. You know what you're doing, because he had spent all those 7.5 years on Rawhide, not just appearing, doing his part and going home. He had been watching everything that went on the set, been learning the trade from behind the camera. So I thought, this is your chance. Joe Hyams was the one who wrote the original story, and then she and Dean Reisner cooperated on the screenplay.
Dean Reisner was a writer I'd worked with before, with Don. I met him through Don. We worked on Coogan's Bluff and a couple projects, and he was very good.
He told me the story of Misty, and of course I was thrilled. I was delighted, and he indicated that he'd like me to do it. But he had his definite ideas about the way he wanted to do it.
He cleaned up some of the setups at the beginning and sort of keeping the perspective of the part that I was playing of Dave, keeping his outlook, and at the same time not losing the characters of the girls.
This particular story, it seemed very true to me. It seemed very real, and I liked that quality that it had. It started off gently, and then it built beautifully, I thought.
Play Misty for me.
I was looking for somebody who could play this role, who was attractive, but at the same time had a sort of a quirky side to him. And that's Jessica. She's certainly a terrific gal, terrific actress.
I had actually just moved to California. I'd done several movies in New York, a lot of television in New York, a lot of theater. I had been in a film Sidney Lumet directed, a wonderful movie called The Group.
And she played a gal, and they had all these, a lot of girls, wonderful parts in there for women. But she had a smaller part, but it was very, very effective.
He had looked at that film for another actress. There were 8 actresses in that movie. The group was comprised of 8 women, and he had seen me in the movie.
There was one scene in there where she's been flirting with the ski instructor, and he finally gets annoyed with it. He slapped her, and the look on her face, I said, it was just something. And I said, yeah, that's the person. And that's the person I want.
And I learned a very good lesson, which was never to show the group to anybody, because there were too many good actresses in that movie. But that's how he came to call me.
The studio, of course, wanted a name. They wanted Lee Remick and various other people they had mentioned. But when Jessica came in the office, and I just took one look at her, I said, yeah. I said, do you want to do this film? And she says, oh, you bet. And I said, okay.
And I was most pleasantly surprised when I met him for the first time, because he was totally un-movie star-like. Anybody who knows him will tell you he's very laid back, very quiet, soft-spoken. I was very impressed with him at the first meeting that I had, which was a long meeting. He was drinking carrot juice. This was before health foods were really popular, you know. I thought, oh my God, you know, and he offered me something. Of course, I politely said no thanks. But I liked him immediately. You can't not like him.
I was looking for somebody who just had that zip, something like the old-time actresses used to have. Any of those actresses that came up in the 40s, they had all that kind of, a lot of them had that kind of edge to them. In 1970, there wasn't a lot of that. We were in an era where women's roles were really secondary to the male leads in the film. Most of them were the girl next door, or kind of very little depth to them. I thought that this is one of the best roles for a woman to be a villain in a film, which wasn't being done at that time.
It was a very interesting time for me right before I got Misty. I was doing a soap opera in New York, and I had told them I was leaving. They were trying to get me to sign, and I said, no, I've been there 3 years, it's enough, I really want to go. And I had come out as part of my contract on that to do a nighttime television show, and it was a Dan August.
I was talking to Burt Reynolds. I said, I'm looking for kind of a girl who's got a certain look, but also has some character. And he said, oh, I just worked with this girl on a television episode. She was really good.
About 2 weeks later, got a call from my agent saying, you got a movie. I said, oh, really? How? He said, well, they just want to hire you. It's a movie with Clint Eastwood. Wow.
I liked her right away. So she was another one that I made a very quick decision on.
Burt Reynolds showed him the dailies. He hired me right from that. I never met him, never read for him, never auditioned, tested nothing.
I thought she'd be a good contrast to Jessica, a good contrast to what was going on between them as opposed to what was going on between his relationship with Jessica's role of Evelyn.
And I finished the soap opera on a Friday, came here, wardrobed on Saturday and Sunday, and went up to Carmel and started shooting Monday morning. And I'd never met Clint until, well, the night before. We met in the bar just to say hello.
You always try to hire the very best people. If they're well-known people, then it works fine. If they're not well-known, you hire them anyway because they're the best for that particular part.
I'm Sergeant McCallum.
John Large, a very good actor who I knew and had played golf with. It wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be on Misty. I had seen it done before many times. There's many precedents for it. Everybody from Orson Welles and Laurence Olivier and all the people who had tried it, and some of them quite successfully. I just kind of, after a while, I got so you could throw the switch a little bit. Don kept on me all the time about don't slough yourself. He says the big temptation is going to be to spend all the time with the other actors and then slough your own performance. So I had to be careful of that. I always remembered those words and had to. That's the one thing you have to be mindful of. And as I've done it now over the years, it's been 30 years since, I still once in a while remind myself, take your time, don't want to move on to the next thing just because you've got everybody else covered.
I was a little bit nervous about him as a director because this was the first thing that he was going to direct. And actors directing isn't always the best idea. They generally have not a great reputation as far as doing movies and things like that. So he was intimidating, but I knew from the first day of shooting that he was a director who knew exactly what he wanted, exactly how to get it. He had everything totally planned. And made me feel very comfortable because no matter what we were doing, he'd look at me too and he'd say, did you like that? Is that okay? I'd say, yeah, okay.
I never thought once about the fact that he was going to be both starring in the movie and directing it. It just never occurred to me that there was anything wrong with it. Actually, it was a nice match because he doesn't like to do too many takes, and I don't either. So usually we only did 1 or 2, maybe 3 takes on a shot. We had the same feeling about not over-rehearsing. It was a good match, I think.
We wanted to be away from the center of the town, and everybody cooperated. We had great cooperation.
It was a small picture. It didn't cost very much. I think the direct costs on the film were $700,000 or $725,000 or something, less any overhead. And that was, even in those days, was still considered very modest.
In those days, it was very unusual to have every shot in a movie, especially a little under $1 million budget movie, be on the location. He was adamant that it be done this way. Nothing fake, no makeup, no process shots, no studio shots. It was, and I think it shows. It's very European in that way.
I didn't want it to look like a television show. Even though nowadays, I suppose if I was shooting for television, I'd shoot it the same way. I always thought it was great because Misty was a classic song, is a classic song that has spanned quite a few generations. It expanded the 60s, 70s, 80s, and it's continued on being popular today. The studio suggested, how about using a song that Universal owns, like Strangers in the Night? And I said, what do you mean, like play Strangers in the Night for me or something? I said, that's been used in a film, very recent to that. And then they said, well, at the end of Strangers in the Night, he says, Scooby-Dooby-Doo. And he said, well, how about play Scooby-Dooby-Doo for me? And right then I said, this conversation's coming to an end. So we bought the song Misty, which cost $25,000, which is a lot of money then, from Errol Garner.
We felt, well, this might be a good idea in case Clint needs a little backup. We'll start right off with Don, who's a director, and with Clint, who's going to be a director, and Don, who's going to be an actor, and Clint, who is an actor. Well, turned out there was nothing to worry about at all. Clint just immediately took charge.
He thought I was crazy doing it. He says, why aren't you hiring a really good, competent actor? Why do you want to hire me? I said, this will be a great experience for you, Don. You've directed and been on this side of the camera. You've never been on the other side. It'll make you more sympathetic to actors' problems. And also, it gives me an opportunity to have you there. I said, what happens if I fall on my face? I've got you there. And everybody will feel happy about that. And so he came down and did it, and of course he was so nervous he would have been no help to me if I'd asked him any pointers on as a director anyway, because he was so intense about trying to get this role, and he was so worried about every line. Finally, I made him throw away pieces of script and improvise a lot of it.
Thanks for the plug.
I think we're on the road to something here. John was very proud of it, and he came over, and John Cassavetes, and John liked it a lot too. He thought it was great. He says, there's only one trouble with this movie, and I said, what's that? And he says, it doesn't have Hitchcock name on it. And I said, oh, really? He says, oh, yeah. He says, if his name was on it, people would be giving this all kinds of things.
It opened up, among other places, at the Cinerama Dome Theater in Hollywood. And they had a 4-week engagement there. And each week it would do a little bigger business than it had done the week before. But they were obligated by contract for a Christmas movie to come in. And I had gone down to see how the business was doing the first week, and I got to know the manager, and he said, I really don't want to yank it out here, but I have no choice. And sure enough, the next week, the Christmas movie came in, business dropped off to 1/4 of what it had been with Misty, and he felt very bad about it. He was very down about it, because business what it had been. Misty was a big hit.
Even though some reviewers liked the film a lot, and a lot of them dismissed it because, as I've always fond of saying, not too many people were sure they were ready to accept me as an actor, much less a director.
I remember thinking, upon seeing Misty, it was pretty good. I mean, it was really a very stirring, interesting.
What I learned on the movie was you never have to worry about Clint as a director. Clint is, in my opinion, the top director in the business today. You hire him, you get the very best direction, you get it on schedule, you get it on budget, and it's highly creative and it's wonderful. He would ask various people, he trusted their judgment, what do you think of this? Then he would digest it all, but the final decision was always his. He went by his basic instincts.
When it was over, I remember the last day, I really shed a few tears, I did. But I remember saying to Clint, he had his little pickup truck, and he drove me back to the motel. And little tears came in my eyes. I said, I'm so sorry it's over, because it really was a labor of love on everybody's part.
It seems as fresh today as it did then, as scary today, which is really saying something because there have been lots of scary movies. There's been lots of things done with cameras and this and that, and this is pretty basic, but it's real.
Well, I could do this a little different than that, and I'm fond of saying that I probably would really wreck it because whatever my thoughts were at that time were probably the proper ones. If I did it now, I might make it slicker, but it might not have the same energy or something. Misty was very important in my life, and I've directed a lot of films since then. Maybe I wouldn't have done any if I hadn't taken that opportunity at that particular time.
We don't have a goddamn thing between us. But I love you!
She's already following you, isn't she?
Don't leave me!
Because this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by you.